My Weirder School, Book Number 10. Mr. Jack is a Maniac. Written by Dan Gutman. Pictures by Jim Pelot. Chapter 1. The H Word. My name is AJ and I hate hate. Let me explain. It was a really nice day, so Dr. Brad, the school counselor, took our class out to the playground to talk. We sat in a circle near the monkey bars. Dr. Brad was telling us how kids need to be nicer to each other. Hate is not a nice word, Dr. Brad told us. We should try to be kind and tolerant of other people, even if we don't like them so much. The world would be a better place if there was less hate, no? So try not to use that word. I hate hate, I said. I can't think of anything I hate more than hate, said Ryan, who will eat anything, even stuff that isn't food. I hate people who hate people, said Michael, who never ties his shoes. Everybody agreed that they hated hate. Well, everybody except Andrea Young, this annoying girl with curly brown hair. If we shouldn't hate things, Andrea said, then we shouldn't hate hate, right? Huh? Yeah, we should like hate, said her crybaby friend Emily, who agrees with everything Andrea says. But it would be wrong to like hate, said Neil, who we call the nude kid even though he wears clothes. I hate hate, but I hate hating hate too, said Alexia, this girl who rides a skateboard everywhere. I thought my head was going to explode. I hate when that happens. Nobody hates hate more than I hate hate, said Ryan. I hate hate more than you hate hate, said Michael. You do not. I do too. They went back and forth like that for a while. Hate, 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 everybody was saying. Stop saying hate, Dr. Brad shouted. But you just said it, I told him. Dr. Brad closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead with his fingers. Did you ever notice that only grown-ups rub their forehead with their fingers? Kids never do that. I guess when you grow up, your forehead gets itchy. Grown-ups are constantly rubbing their forehead with their fingers. The point is, said Dr. Brad, we should try to use the H word less and love each other more. Everybody started giggling and poking each other with their elbows because Dr. Brad said the L word. Anytime somebody says love, you should start giggling and poking the person next to you with your elbow. That's the first rule of being a kid. You know what I mean, Dr. Brad said. If you have a disagreement with someone, you should try to talk it out instead of fighting about it all the time. Dr. Brad got up, and we all walked near the woods at the end of the playground. We're not supposed to play back there. Our principal, Mr. Klutz, once told us that he saw a big black bear out there one day. He was probably just kidding, but I stay away from the back of the playground anyway, because I don't want to get attacked by a big black bear. That's when the most amazing thing in the history of the world happened. There was a loud sound in the cheese. We all turned around. And you'll never believe in 1,100 years what came roaring out of the woods. No, it wasn't a big black bear. Ha! You thought it was a big black bear, didn't you? Well, na boo boo on you, because it wasn't. It was a big black motorcycle. A big black loud motorcycle, and it was coming straight at us. Eek! Shouted all the girls. Run for your life! Shouted Neil, the nude kid. The big black motorcycle skidded to a stop right next to Dr. Brad. After the dust cleared, the guy riding the motorcycle took off his helmet. He had deep blue eyes and long dark hair. He said only one word. Yo. Chapter 2. Mr. Jack is cool. Is yo even a word? I know that yo-yo is a word. I saw this guy at a toy store once who did yo-yo tricks. He could fling the thing above his head, between his legs, and all over the place. Yo-yos are cool. Where was I? Oh yeah, it doesn't matter if yo is a word or not, because the motorcycle guy said it. And if you say it, I guess it must be a word. Who's he? Everybody was asking. He's cool, said Neil, the nude kid. He looks like a movie star, said Alexia. He's handsome, said Andrea. He's dreamy, said Emily. The motorcycle guy turned off his motorcycle. He was wearing leather pants, leather shoes, a leather belt, and a leather jacket. That guy must really like leather. I wondered how many cows had to die to make his clothes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a comb. Then he started combing his hair in slow motion. Doing anything in slow motion is cool. I saw this TV show once where they dropped watermelons out of a 10-story building and you could see them hit the ground and explode in slow motion. That was cool. Excuse me, sir, said Dr. Brad. May I ask who you are and what you are doing on school property? The motorcycle guy didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared at Dr. Brad with his deep blue eyes. My name is Mr. Jack, he finally said. You can call me Mr. Jack. But your name is Mr. Jack, said Ryan. I know, said Mr. Jack. That's why you should call me Mr. Jack. Don't you want us to call you something instead of Mr. Jack? Asked Michael. No, why? Asked Mr. Jack. When people say you can call me, that usually means we should call them something different from their regular name, I told him. Not this time, said Mr. Jack. That guy is weird. The recess bell rang, and kids came pouring out of the school. They must have seen the motorcycle, because a whole bunch of them came running over and gathered around Mr. Jack. So did some of the teachers. Well, hello, said our gym teacher, Miss Small. She was giggly and she started fussing with her hair. "Hi there, stranger," said Miss Holly, our Spanish teacher. She was blushing and started fanning herself with her hand. "New in town?" asked Miss Hannah, our art teacher. She pulled a little mirror out of her pocket and started putting makeup on her face. All the lady teachers were giggling and blushing and fussing with their hair and fanning themselves and looking in little mirrors. Ladies always do that stuff when they're in love. Nobody knows why. Miss Small looked like she was going to faint. "What's your name, sugar?" asked Miss Laney, our speech teacher. "Hello, ladies. My name is Mr. Jack. You can call me Mr. Jack." "Well," giggled Miss Holly, "you can call me Available." Dr. Brad pushed his way to the front so he could talk to Mr. Jack. "I'm sorry, sir, but what you are doing is called trespassing," said Dr. Brad. "This is school property. You need to leave." "Oh, yeah?" said Mr. Jack. "Who's gonna make me?" "Ooh," we all said. Anytime somebody says, "Who's gonna make me?" you have to say, "Ooh." That's the first rule of being a kid. "I suppose I'm going to make you," said Dr. Brad. "Oh, yeah?" said Mr. Jack. "You in what army?" "Ooh." Anytime somebody says, "You in what army?" you have to say, "Ooh." That's the second rule of being a kid. "I'm scared," said Emily, who's scared of everything. Dr. Brad was looking at Mr. Jack. Mr. Jack was looking at Dr. Brad. We were all looking at Dr. Brad and Mr. Jack. Well, the girls were pretty much just looking at Mr. Jack. At that moment, the back door of the school opened and a bunch of male teachers came out. Mr. Mackey, Mr. Granite, Mr. Loring, Mr. Docker, even Mr. Louis, our crossing guard, and Mr. Tony, the after-school program director, came out. They all ran over and made a circle around Mr. Jack. "These are me," said Dr. Brad. "Ooh." Chapter 3. Weapons of Mass Destruction. "Who is this guy?" asked Mr. Mackey, our reading specialist. "His name is Mr. Jack," I said, "but you can call him Mr. Jack." "Okay, Mr. Jack," said our science teacher, Mr. Docker. "This is school property. You can't stay here. We have you outnumbered. If you won't leave on your own, we're going to have to make you leave." "Oh, let him stay," said Miss Holly. "He's cute." "Yeah," said all the lady teachers. "He's cute." Then they all started giggling. "This is going to be cool," Ryan whispered to me. "Now this is exactly the kind of situation I was telling you children about," said Dr. Brad. "We are having a little disagreement here. When mature adults have disagreements, the best way to settle them is to have an open and honest discussion instead of fight." But Dr. Brad didn't get the chance to finish his sentence. At that moment, Mr. Jack picked him up and held him in the air. "Ee-yah!" screamed Mr. Jack. Then he threw Dr. Brad across the playground. Wow, we all said, which is Mom upside down. Dr. Brad landed in the bushes. It was cool. I had no idea you could throw another person so far. Mr. Jack jumped into a karate pose. I must warn the rest of you fellows, he said. These hands are dangerous tools. In fact, I had to have them registered with the government as weapons of mass destruction. Mr. Jack's hands looked just like regular hands to me, but what do I know about karate? We're not afraid, said Mr. Tony. Come on, boys, let's take him. With that, Mr. Tony charged at Mr. Jack. "Ee-yah!" screamed Mr. Jack. He spun around fast, grabbed Mr. Tony's arms, gave him a kick in the butt, and sent him tumbling to the ground. I don't approve of violence on school property, said Andrea. What do you have against violence? I asked her. Not violence, Arlo, Andrea shouted at me. Violence. Oh, that's different, I said. Mr. Tony got up, and the other male teachers came after Mr. Jack, one at a time. Mr. Granite jumped on Mr. Jack. Mr. Jack flipped him sideways. Mr. Granite was flat on his back. Mr. Louis tried to grab Mr. Jack's legs. Mr. Jack jumped up and landed on Mr. Louis. "Ee-yah!" screamed Mr. Jack. "Hide your eyes, Emily," Andrea said. "This kind of behavior is definitely not appropriate for children." Mr. Mackey and Mr. Loring charged at Mr. Jack, but Mr. Jack grabbed both of them at the same time and bonked their heads together. "Ee-yah!" screamed Mr. Jack. "Oof!" grunted Mr. Loring as he hit the ground with a thud. One by one, Mr. Jack kicked all their butts. It was like watching professional wrestling on TV, but without the TV. All the lady teachers were giggling and blushing and fussing with their hair and fanning themselves and looking at their faces in little mirrors. All the male teachers were sprawled on the ground, moaning and groaning. It was hilarious. "I guess you fellows will think twice before messing with Mr. Jack again," said Mr. Jack. Then he started combing his hair. "How do I look?" he asked. "Does anybody want my autograph?"